What is up, everybody? It is the chairman of the United States Department of Nerds, where we are for the people, by the people, and of the people.
You are listening to the USDN on the DSPN.
It's a trap!
All right, what's up, everybody? Today I have a big night for everybody planned out. We're getting to sit down with Bobby Campbell and his new kit starter, Tales of the Illuminatus Issue 2, correct?
That is all correct. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So let's just dive right into it. What is the Tales of the Illuminatus? I know it's an anthology book series by Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson, but how did you, sir, become involved with this book?
Sure, yeah. So it kind of started out about 20 years ago. A friend of mine left the original book trilogy sitting in my bedroom, and I picked it up, opened it up, and within about two and a half days, I'd gone through and read all 800 pages. I didn't do anything else for days and days and just read through and got pulled through infinity into a brand new way of looking at the world. And I just got really into, especially Robert Anton Wilson. So there's two authors on the book, Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea. Robert Anton Wilson is the one that kind of made that world his calling card. He went on to write like sequels and prequels and a lot of nonfiction books that pick up the theme of the novel. So I went to the library. They had pretty much everything Robert Anton Wilson had ever written, and I just read through the whole thing. And just a couple of years later, Robert Anton Wilson opened up an online workshop space. He was stricken with post polio syndrome, so he couldn't go around and do his usual speaking engagements. So he opened up an online space where he could get put on workshops, and I got to know him. I got to do some artwork for him, and just kind of became involved in his world. And then after he passed, I became involved with his estate, doing book covers and other
That's really cool.
Yeah, so I've been kind of working in this general world for about 20 years, and the guy that owns the media adaptation rights to Illuminatus reached out to me just to have a conversation about possibilities, and he was kind of hinting at that he wanted to maybe have a comic book adaptation of the novel, and I was explaining to him why I couldn't do it, because this book is crazy. It is so it's kaleidoscopic, it's multifaceted, it's unfilmable, it's undoable. And as I was explaining why I couldn't do it, I talked myself into doing it, because I had found the path into it while I was explaining that there was no path. And that was, I guess, about a year and a half ago. And last summer we put out the first issue, and it all kind of went perfectly. And so we're back at it again.
So I'm not gonna lie, I read your your editor. I think it's your editor or your
So that's he edits the book, and he's also the one that owns the rights to Illuminatus.
Okay. Yeah, when he reached out to me to say, "Hey, will you interview Bobby?" I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. He's like, hey, here's volume 1, give it a read, or issue 1, give it a read. And you start scrolling through it, and you're like, the hell am I reading right now?
Yeah, that's
And
right. Yeah,
you go through 8 pages, and then all of a sudden there's the story. I think it was like 8 pages, something like that. And then you
yeah.
get into the story, and then you're like, oh, okay. And then you start reading, and you're like, oh wow, this is different. This is out there. So that drove me to go in, okay, let me Google the book. And then I'll read the first few pages of the book, and I'm like, oh damn, this is just out there.
Yeah. Though I will say, like, so Illuminatus is one of those books. I always describe it as like the velvet underground of literature, whereas like the book itself never became that overwhelmingly famous. I mean, it did very well back in the 70s, but it never became like a bestseller in a traditional sense. But
Yeah.
so many people who read it then went on to become influential writers
Mhm.
and artists and like every kind of
I was gonna say
creative
it's got
in
a
the
cult
world.
following from what I gathered from just reading what little bit I did and what little bit of research I had a little bit of time to do from between everything else. It's got a cult following and it seems really popular. I know there was Robert Antoine Wilson has somebody did a fan page for him on Blue Sky. So when I was posting, I was doing my interview with you, and I'm like, oh, cool. I'm like, I asked the question. I'm like, oh, how did it feel? Somebody making your book into a comic book, and they're like, oh, he passed, and I'm just tribute page. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, my bad. And then hang on, let me go back and look. And I went and seen his birthdays, and like when he passed, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but it's been great because there is his legend has kind of grown since he passed, and he's probably more popular now than
The great
he
ones,
ever
man.
was. Yeah, that
The
it's
great
just
ones are
like
always that way.
yeah. And so it's been wild to actually like work on something that has this like built-in audience and this built-in support. We did the Small Press Expo, and the amount of people we had a steady stream of people coming by the table just wanting to tell us about the first time they read Illuminatus, and just there was this outpouring of recognition and love that
Mhm.
was really encouraging.
Yeah,
And
I never seen a single negative thing about the book when I was doing my research on it. Everybody was very positive toward the book and what the book represented. And you read like how it made people feel and like because it's do you take it seriously? I mean, it's kind of a out there, but it touches on some like especially when his book was written in the 70s, the Illuminati and stuff like that, the occults, those were huge in during that time frame. So for somebody to just drop not just a book, but a whole trilogy of books about that was probably for the people in the 70s and early 80s was probably mind blowing that like, oh, wait a minute, what is this? Is this stuff real? So I
yeah,
can imagine, like, and then when people are approaching you now and going, "Hey, you're the guy that writes the comic book," how that like how it made them feel back then with like, wait, this is real to some people still. They
yeah,
still
for
believe that
sure.
stuff.
And I think what really helps its reputation is it refuses to take itself seriously in any like aggressive way. There is
Mhm.
nothing that you are being asked to believe. In fact, you are being encouraged to believe less. You're encouraged to be more flexible, not
Yep.
less. We want your world to get bigger, not smaller.
It's
And it's
definitely an open-minded book.
yeah. It's like a extended exercise in what if without any definitive conclusion to box you in on to say now you got to
Mhm.
think this or now you got to think that. It's adding ingredients to your stew, like things you
Yep.
can pick and choose and
Yep.
reject or accept. And yeah, and it's kind of interesting too because in some ways, so one of the reasons why I think it's more recognizable now than it was back then is because the Illuminati has become this household term, which wasn't even true when I first read it 20 years ago. It was not really a thing that, like, if you show any 12-year-old a triangle with a dot in it, they're going to say Illuminati confirmed. They know what that means.
Their rappers and other people have kind of made this thing out of it and put it out there and made it this mainstream thing, whether it exists or not. It's out there and it's made itself mainstream once again.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the reason why it is ubiquitous right now traces back to the publication of this book, but in an indirect way. So it wasn't that everybody read it and started talking about the Illuminati, but so there's a way in which not only is the book about conspiracies, but it actually contains one within itself that has grown more interesting as time has gone on. And so there's this guy, Kerry Thornley. So Kerry Thornley was friends with Robert Anton Wilson. They bonded over like working in the underground press, and they were both anti-authoritarian and all that sort of like good 1960s rebellious young people kind of stuff. But Kerry Thornley had an interesting backstory in that he was friends with Lee Harvey Oswald back when they were in the Marines.
Wow. Okay.
And so Lee Harvey Oswald was a peculiar fella even back then, enough so that that Kerry Thornley wrote a book about him, like a novel based on him as a personality. So when years later he hears on the radio that Lee Harvey Oswald has shot the president, he's freaked out because it's essentially the main character from the novel he's writing has leapt off the page and shot the president, which is kind of a trippy thing. So that's kind of
acid trip right there.
Yeah. And he also had, along with this other guy, Gregory Hill, they founded a religion called Discordianism based around the worship of Eris, the goddess of chaos. So here's this guy, he invents a religion that it's like either a joke disguised as a religion or a religion disguised as a joke.
It's like Judaism.
Yeah. So Kerry Thornley ends up getting involved in the investigation into Lee Harvey Oswald to the point that when the investigation kicks up again in New Orleans, he gets drug into it as a potential co-conspirator in the assassination. And so when Jim Garrison charges him with perjury for lying and saying that he hadn't reconnected with Lee Harvey Oswald right before the assassination, which so far as Kerry Thornley knows, he did not. So now he's like literally in trouble with the law because they think he was involved in it. And then here's where it connects to Illuminatus. So Kerry Thornley finds out that one of the guys on Garrison's investigation unit believes in the Illuminati. And so what he wants to do is he wants to basically, in modern parlance, troll Garrison by flooding the underground press with stories about the Illuminati to be like, your investigation lacks rigor to such a degree that you have people on there that believe in leprechauns and crazy things like the Illuminati. So they flood the underground press with stories about the Illuminati. So in the 60s, there's all these stories that come out about the Illuminati, which then seeds the culture with the idea, which then it starts growing because people are reading this and they don't know that it's a joke. And so
it's one of those weird things, though. The Illuminati supposedly has been around since the Egyptians made the pyramids.
There is a historic basis. Yeah.
So, but when you mix in like a little bit of seeds in it, it tends to take its own, way of
Correct.
growing and
Yeah.
infiltrate mainstream culture.
Correct. So it took on a life of its own. But one of the main places that the seeds were planted were Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea were editors of the Playboy Forum, and so they
I've seen that,
planted
yeah.
they planted in Playboy a fake letter from someone asking about the Illuminati, which was one of the more high profile spreadings of this idea. And then so they were getting a lot of weird letters anyway, and it became tough to tell. So the thing where they were spreading the idea about the Illuminati, it was part of this thing called Operation Mindfuck. And so it got to the point where they were getting all these letters and they couldn't tell which were things from Operation Mindfuck and which were just people expressing their actual ideas. And so the idea for Illuminatus was, what if we just took all these weird ideas and paranoid letters we're getting and just decided that they were all true and wrote a mythology around this idea of Discordians versus the Illuminati. And that was the entry point for the trilogy. And it just kind of has snowballed from there.
No, it's really cool. Even me myself, like my next trip to the bookstore, I'm going to be looking for this just because I really want to dive into it, because a lot of the stuff you just mentioned is stuff as I was doing my research was things that kept popping up into it. And I'm like, man, these guys lived this crazy life. They worked on Playboy, that back in the glory days of Playboy before it became what it is today, which is just an online, thing.
Right. Yeah. Back then it was actually like a cultural
news thing that men
Yeah.
read, and it was this thing. It was really just about the articles in it and not just the girls.
Right.
So
yeah.
The stuff that they were producing, men were reading and really taking that to heart and to mind and going, hey, this shit's for reals. Playboy's talking about it. It has to be real.
Right. And, but in a little bit, they were using that to kind of play a prank on the culture. But so one of Robert Anton Wilson's favorite tricks is to take one scoop of truth and one scoop of fantasy and blend it together such that you can't tell them apart. Because when that happens, so his theory was, you had to start thinking for yourself. You had to start making discernments that weren't just given to you. It was up to you to then figure out what was going on, and it kind of disrupted that. Like we tend to automatically believe things that come from sources that make us comfortable, and that sometimes makes us vulnerable in ways that is hard to see. It's easy to see when it's happening to someone else. It's much harder to see when it's happening to us. You know what I mean? Like, you can tell when someone's like, come on, that's propaganda. That's not true. You just believe that because of this, that, or the other. But I know for a fact I've caught myself exhibiting those same behaviors, but it's much tougher to tell when it's happening to you. And this was meant to be something that encouraged that kind of self-reflection and that kind of self-awareness and that kind of flexibility. And one of the thesis statements of the novel is that communication can only occur between equals. And so if you're kind of like, well, everyone else is kind of low information, this or that, but the more you can come to a conversation as equals, the more you can honestly exchange. And then the other thing is, like, the other caveat to that principle is everyone lies to their boss because they don't want to get in trouble. And so when you look at the top of the pyramid, like whoever's in charge of whatever organization you're a part of, they don't know what the fuck's going on because no one will tell them the truth. because
Yep.
it's just lies
Only
all the
what
way
you
up
need
the
to hear.
chain. Yeah,
Only what
yeah,
you
yeah.
need to hear.
Exactly. And some version of it that doesn't get me in trouble is that, you know what I mean? Like
Exactly. Yep.
that's a universal principle that everyone adheres by. And so your boss only has a a very narrow idea of what actually happened, and his boss only knows a fraction, and so on. So
Yep.
that's one of the snafus we're dealing with.
No, but it is great. It's one of those where, I mean, I'm saying, as I was reading through the first one, and I dove into the first few pages of the book to try to get my mind wrapped around it, which I really don't think I got my mind wrapped around it. I don't think you really can wrap your mind around everything that's going on really within these books and this story, because it does kind of start like there's a talking dolphin in there. As you walk through the initial
Yeah.
pages of the volume first issue, like there's a talking dolphin. There's a lot of weird things going on before you get to the actual story. So let me ask you this: what's it been like trying to take this book with all its intricacies, and there's a lot, and make that into a comic book that make some kind of sense, especially in the
Yes.
beginning of it, where you're kind of like, what in the hell is going on in this book?
Yeah, so in its conception stage, it was very tough, and there was a lot of false starts and a lot of like wrong approaches that were abandoned, and it ended up. The answer was so super simple. So there was a couple of problems to deal with. The first is the book takes place on a unspecified date, but that is clearly in the mid to late 70s.
Yep.
So there's a lot of temptation to modernize it because like you want it to feel like it's about what's going on right now, and you want it to be current. So there was a few ideas about adapting it so it takes place in current times, but like a lightning bolt, I realized no, it's a period piece. And once I got that idea that it was a period piece, so many complications just dropped away, and so many opportunities popped up, because I realized every single like mundane scene setting element becomes interesting when it's set in 1976, because
Yep.
you get to draw phone booths, you get to draw
Yeah,
you get to draw
I was
like
gonna bring that up.
you get to draw record players, you get to draw like the clothes, you get to draw the cars, you get to draw like just it just unlocked this visual component to it that I was like, oh, it's Jackie Brown. You know what I mean? Like it's the
Tracy
time
all
period.
day.
Right, exactly. And so you kind of get to cheat, because every little thing, if you just focus on a background element, becomes visually interesting, which is something, because when you're going from a book into a comic book, a book might have 15 pages that's just a guy thinking or just two people talking, which doesn't really work in a comic. So every little anchor that you can get to make it more interesting helps. So the period piece thing was one key that unlocked it. And then the other one was the idea that, so I tried to at first get a comprehensive understanding of the book and the world, but I quickly realized that that was impossible, and that I can,
without illicit drugs.
Right.
You
And
definitely
like
need some illicit drugs.
for sure. And like I have access to people who are actual scholars of this material, and sometimes I'll write them and ask them a question, and the answer by and large is I don't know. That is not yet known. It's almost because one of the influences on this was James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake and Ulysses, which is the whole point, is to make it so packed with detail that it's inexhaustible. So if the point of the thing is to be inexhaustible, I'm not going to be able to have a God's eye view of it that I can then impart upon the audience. So if that's not possible, I cast myself in the role of one of the two detectives that are the main characters in the story. So I'm not a third person omniscient narrator. I'm a detective on the case.
Yeah, that would
And
be, yeah.
so, you know what I mean? And then the book then becomes an invitation to the mystery as opposed to a dictation of the mystery. So the reader is being invited in as opposed to it's not didactic. It's not being explained to you. You're brought into the adventure.
That's what I liked when I read issue 1 is once you got past those first, you know, mind tricking pages, and you meet the detectives working the case that's taking place. It was really like you felt like you were being brought into this story with these detectives, and you were feeling what they were feeling, because I mean the guy's calling his wife and he's like, hey, I'm not going to make it home, we're working this case. I'm like, oh damn, I've been there from being in the office all day, so
Right,
I
for
know
sure.
exactly how he's feeling. And
and there's a part where where they're going through these memos, which is like so there's been a bombing at a magazine. They find what the magazine, their current issue that they were working on. And so I just give the documents over to the reader, and they're the detective. You're on the case. You're on the job. So as opposed to it being a mystery in a traditional sense, it's you're the detective. You've been given
in there. You're in there.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I have found very interesting is how much of current events obviously link back to that time period anyway. So there's no effort to make it about right now, because it is about right now, because the
really
present is about the past. The past comes forward into the future. So if you want to chase down what we're living right now, the seeds are in the past, and that's where we're at. So it didn't take any effort to make it about now, because that's just how history works.
That it's funny you bring that up, because as I'm reading that first volume, I was just like, damn, I thought this was about this book. I'm like, this feels like it could have happened yesterday.
Yeah, for sure. And that was the impression I get rereading it. Yeah. And you're like, oh, there's kind of always been this tension. There's always been these divides. There's always been this sense that like we're at the cutting edge of incredible times, because that's what it's like to be in the present. To be in the present is to be amongst cutting edge apocalyptic times, because it's the present, because we don't know what's going to happen next. They felt the same way back then. And so you kind of get this resonance from a time, another extreme time when people were feeling really, really uncertain and felt like they were in unprecedented times. And there's a lot of just like, there's a little bit of reassurance too, to be like, oh, they were super worried back then too, and maybe we'll pull through and move on to stabler times, just as it happened again and again and again. It always happens.
It's crazy how it works like that, and how something that was written written in the late 70s, wasn't it?
So it was actually written in the late 60s, and it took them forever to get someone to publish it. So I think it was sat on for about 6 or 7 years before it made it out the gate. So, which must have been like crazy for them, because you'd be so, like, if something I wrote 6 years, it sat on the shelf, you'd be so worried that it wouldn't resonate anymore. But now here it is.
What do you do in the meantime? Like I just poured my heart and soul into this piece, and it's just sitting over here collecting dust, waiting for somebody. I mean, I guess it's kind of like how J.K. Rowling felt when she wrote the first Harry Potter and stuff like that, where it just kind of was just sitting there. She's like, oh,
sitting in the shelf,
and it's just sitting on the shelf because nobody will pick it up, because women don't write,
Right? Yeah.
Well, this one was very different. This was a very, But so let me ask: is this your first comic book? Is this your first?
No.
Venture into it?
No, I've been making indie comics for about 20 years now. So this, all told, this is probably my 30th book.
Okay,
that I've
cool.
done. Yeah, about maybe depending on how you divide it, more or less. But
Mhm.
yeah, no, I've been making comics a long, long time.
Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know if like it's funny. I put all these brain cells into the book and the comic book, and now I'm like, wait, you know what I didn't do is pour a lot of brains and cells and thoughts into like who is Bobby Campbell? So let's
sure.
do that now.
Yeah,
Who exactly is Bobby Campbell? Give us your background and how like you became like this, how you got into the comic book world to begin with and
sure.
led you to where you are right now in Tales of the Illuminatus.
Yeah. So as far back as I can remember, I've been drawing and writing stories. So wherever that comes from, it's pre-memory. That was always there.
Yeah.
Um, I've been making comics steadily since about 1993. I started out. I did 7 issues of a Spider-Man comic called Arachnophobia when I was
Okay.
13 and 14 years old, and I just kind of never really stopped from there. I went to the Pratt Institute for a year, um, uh, fresh out of high school, but then kind of realized that it was far, far too expensive to keep going. I mean, even back then in
Yeah.
1999, it was 30 grand a year. So it was like, that's
For
expensive
art
now, even
college.
for
For
art
art
college. Well, and also I went and I was like, because they tell you like, oh, we have 100% job placement rate. And then I went to a party where a bunch of people who had graduated and they were like, yeah, it was fun, but I can't get a job. And I was like, oh yeah, but the school has 100% job placement. And they were like, that's not real. And I was like, oh shit. So yeah, so I transferred back
I'm
to
laughing with
university.
you. I swear to God,
No,
I'm
yeah, no,
laughing
for
with you.
sure. So I then I went back to Delaware, went to the University of Delaware, and chose a much more lucrative profession or a lucrative major with a future philosophy. So,
Oh,
um, but yeah, so we started doing indie comics right after I got back to Delaware, and I mean, when you're making comics with your friends and you have no one to compare yourself to,
mhm,
you think you're doing, the greatest work anyone has
yeah.
ever seen,
So
and you're
who
about to
is
set the world on
like
fire.
as you're doing this with your friends, like who's producing the work for you? Who's printing it? Are y'all going down to the the print and press place and they're like, hey, can you print this out for us?
So the interesting story with that. So we went to one of the early Wizard Cons in Chicago,
Okay.
and we brought our pages, and I was standing in. I mean, we thought Vertigo was going to buy us right off the bat. Like that's how delusional we were. So
I
I'm
love
standing in
Vertigo to this
line.
day. I'm so
Oh no,
happy
me
that
too.
Vertigo is
Oh
back.
man, yeah, me too. So we're standing in line at to get a portfolio review, and I'm looking around, and I notice like everyone else's pages look like Jim Lee, and my pages are like really like scrappy indie stuff. And I was just like, oh no, I think I've made a terrible mistake. And that they cancel. There's too many people doing the portfolio review. They send
Yeah.
everybody away, and so I'm dejected. And this guy, you ever heard of Phil Ye?
It sounds familiar.
He was part of that scene with like Scott McCloud and with Matt Groening and
Okay.
the Ninja Turtle guys, like that
Jim
early
East and
run.
that yeah.
Yeah, all those indie guys. He did a bunch of work with Mobius also. So
Okay.
so he's like a real guy. I hadn't heard of him at the time, but he sees me walking away, and he comes over and he goes, I'll look at your pages. I'll look at your pages. And so he goes through and he like, because it's indie stuff, he actually likes it. He thought I was going to be one of the Jim Lee clones, but it
Yeah.
was kind of something that spoke more to him. And he just explained how to make
Jim
mini
Lee to
comics.
this day cannot be cloned. That man is
Oh no, for
something
sure, for
special.
sure. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like to this
But people
day, like the
tried.
work he
People
does
tried.
is incredible.
Yeah, no, watching him draw is one of the joys of life. It's just, yeah,
There's a few of them that if I see them go live drawing, I'm glued to YouTube
yeah,
watching these guys or Instagram or
absolutely.
wherever. But yeah, he just did one like last week, I think, and that was like my life for like 45 minutes until I got called away to do something else. I'm like, Jim Lee's drawing. I'm gonna watch. Sorry.
Yeah, I remember back when Image first launched. Those guys, when they did that big tour.
Mhm.
So like, there's so many. A lot of them probably aren't around anymore, but so many of those old comic shops had doors that were drawn on by Jim Lee. And I know
Mhm.
the Comic Mania, the shop in Delaware, they had a door that all the guys drew on, and it's just like, how can you draw on a door
It's
perfectly?
amazing how many artists come out of that area right there. There was like not just there, but that was like kind of like this booming area for comic creators, from what I've seen. And I'm just like, because Jersey even now is still huge
Oh yeah,
in the
yeah,
comic scene.
especially they've got the Kubert School there, which I think is one of the reasons why it churns
Okay,
out so many people. I think that's a big part of it.
because I know
Um,
like even those small little comic shops up there, Erica Schultz, who we were discussing before we went live, who's doing Rat City, and Lauren with That's 23 and Daredevil's Unleashed Hell that's currently going on. She was just up there doing a signing, and I think she's in that area too. So that's
yeah,
kind of
no,
like her hometown shop that she just shows up and does sign-ins.
yeah, Philadelphia is really
And
like
Philly's the other one, yeah.
really getting it together. Yeah, there's a couple of really good shops and a lot of really good like indie collectives that put on these great shows that I
Mhm.
mean, it's hard to get a table at. And that's for a local show. Like that's just the local artists. And there's so many like really good studios and really
Yeah,
good operations up.
it
Um,
really is. And I'm like, I'm in the area, but I'm still far away. You know what I'm saying? It's still
yeah,
a
yeah.
good day's drive, and I see all these things happening and people posting about them, and I'm like, it's right there, but it's happening on like a Wednesday or something,
Right. Yeah.
and now I got to take PTO and go up there, or I have to drive. You know, Jersey's not that far away, to be
Yeah.
fair,
Yeah.
because when we go to New York City, that's what we do. We go to Jersey, we park in Jersey, we stay in Jersey, we catch the boat across the water to New York City, and that's how we go to New York City, because it's cheaper to stay on the Jersey side than the New York side.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
And but even there, like New York City itself, I think there's 3 comic shops. But in Jersey itself, it feels like there's one on like every city has a nice one.
No, this is crazy. So I live in a tiny little town, right? I got 4 comic shops within walking distance of my house. That's I've never had such a like bounty of shops ever in my life.
Yeah,
Literally
and I'm
4
sure they're
shops that I
really
could
nice
walk
ones
to.
too.
Yep, absolutely. No, it's this general area is really good
Mhm.
for comics
Yeah.
appreciation.
And I was telling you
And
before you went live that like when you said you were in South Jersey, I'm like, oh, I get to add another Jersey guy to my friends list, because I do literally have quite a few friends that are in that area, and they're both involved with. Um, you've heard of the Pop Break?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bill Bodkin, who runs that, he's there. Um, he's a Rutgers grad. Um, I think he pays me to say that, I'm sure. And then I got another friend who's in Northern Jersey, and they're involved in the indie wrestling scene. So I know all these people up there, and I'm like, I just need a good weekend, a 3 or 4 day weekend where I can just go to Jersey and spend like the entire weekend up there with all my friends and go to all these really cool comic shops they have there, because y'all have tons of them, it
Yeah,
seems.
we really do. Absolutely. And then in Philly, there's this shop, Partners and Son, and pretty much any big indie book that comes out, they'll have the creators there. They'll do an art show. They'll do
That's really cool.
talks. It's incredible. Um, uh, so um, so Phil Ye basically just walked me through how to do mini comics. He was like, "Here's what you're going to do with these pages. Stop going to
Kinkos.
companies stop going to companies and asking them to look at your stuff and just take it down to Kinkos and make it yourself." And that kind of just became the mission statement for a good long
Yeah.
time. And then as time went on, getting books printed became easier and easier. Like the first couple books we did were the old offset print on newsprint.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with 1,000 copy minimums. Like, oh man, do you know how hard
But
it
it
is
was
to get rid of
still-
1,000 copies?
It is, but it was really cheap to print it off too.
It was. Yeah. In fact, I can't find anyone that'll do newsprint anymore. It's very hard. I miss it.
It's
I miss
gloss
the newsprint.
or what's it called? The heavier stuff, not the gloss, but the damn it! It's what a lot of the comic book creators.
Oh, cardstock.
Cardstock, yeah.
So yeah, to be honest, I would love to get to be able to print on newsprint again, but it's now this like niche market. It would actually be more expensive now probably than printing on regular
exactly
paper.
Right? Yeah. Yep.
But then as time went on, and you could just order 50, 100, 200 copies of full color books. It became much easier to self-publish than it was back in the day. And those Kinko's machines were unforgiving. It had to be black
Perfectly
or white.
censored, yeah.
Black or white. You could have no grayscale. Nowadays, you can get grayscale on your black and white prints. But so I ended up developing this really weird, like doing hatch mark and stipple just to create tones. I basically became a human zipatone factory. And so I had this it took me a long time to work out of you. If you like get the pages in the comic and like look really close, I'm still like cross hatching, even though I don't need to, just the habit won't go away.
It's funny you say that though, but a lot of the guys who write and draw manga in Japan, they still use crosshatch heavily. If you've ever looked at their books, and the way they do it and the amount of detail they can squeeze into crosshatch and stuff, and it's mind-numbingly amazing. Like because you get this nice, pretty cover and outside, and then inside of it is mostly black and white.
Yeah,
and you get the crosshatch in and how they do the shadow in, and you're like, dude, this art is phenomenal. And I'm like, you can tell they're just sit there like hours on a page cross-hatching and adding these little minute details into it with cross-hatching. And it's like, dude, I can't imagine the amount of time.
Oh man, I spent so much time doing that stuff.
That one quarter panel of a book.
Yeah.
But okay, so let's go to let's talk about the actual Kickstarter itself. When are you kicking off Tales of the Illuminatus issue 2?
So we're kicking off on April 1st, so Tuesday. So the pre-save page is already up there, but we're gonna open it up on August 1st. We're gonna run it for 2 months.
1st?
We're gonna. Oh no, I'm sorry. April 1st, April Fool's Day.
It's like
no, that's all right. We're gonna run it for. We're gonna run it for 2 months. We're gonna have a nice leisurely campaign, and we're gonna be good to go. We're gonna be shipping either in early summer or midsummer, so either June or July. We'll be sending books out, and
so that's not too far.
Yeah. So the turnaround time should be pretty quick, and I think we're going to have time to get a jump start on issue 3. So we're going to try to do 2 issues in the upcoming year. So we did one because I'm a high school teacher, so I have the summers, and so it's real. I think we're going to be able to get issue 2 done with enough time to get a jump start on issue 3, so we don't have to wait so long in between issues.
2 issues drop in this year, and then 2 the following. How many issues
that's the
do
goal.
you think you're going to get out of the book? Because
I think
3 books, 800 pages.
Yeah,
that's a lot of comic books.
It is indeed, and we are currently at about a page-to-page translation ratio. So for every page of the book, we're at about a page of the comic. So we have a couple of different contingency plans. So we have, so if we keep up the pace we're going as it's outlined, I think it's about 23 issues long, would be to do the full thing. But we also, if the book catches on in a big bad way, We also have prequels and sequels that we can adapt as well. There's a whole nother there's a whole nother trilogy and a couple of side books and stuff like that. So if we want to keep the thing rolling past 23, we definitely can. But I'm also, because you know how the indie comics is, you don't always make it where you're hoping to make it. So we have we have a collection point we're hitting, which is issue 5 is where we're going to collect everything together. And it's kind of one of those things where it can work as a complete story, or it can work as a rest point before we continue on into the rest of the series.
Once you get to issue 5, you're going to pause it, do a trade paperback, and then continue on.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So because the goal is we don't want to leave people hanging. We would like to have a complete satisfying read. And so we have something that's doable with just the free time that I have if it doesn't catch fire and become this juggernaut. So we'll definitely get to that. And then sky's the limit if it does catch on, because there's another 1,600 pages worth of material that we can adapt. So this thing could go on.
The amount of material that's out there outside of just the trilogy, the prequels and the other things, it's pretty crazy. So I know other authors and comic book creators who do take books as well. Like a lot of the Star Wars stuff, they take the book and they make it into comic books as well. How hard and I think I kind of asked you this earlier, how hard is it from just any perspective really to translate a book into a comic book? That's gotta, because you gotta a page could be like a quarter panel sometimes, or it could be a whole page is a page.
For sure. It actually has turned out to be a lot easier than I thought, because I figured out kind of an approach that works, which is essentially I'm trying to, when I'm adapting, I'm paying attention to what's physically happening in the book. So because it might be that across 8 pages, a guy is making a cup of coffee, right? That's all that's physically happening, where he's thinking back to, or thinking of all sorts of emotions that he's having, or things that aren't physical. So rule number 1 that I have for myself is to follow what is physically happening in the book. Where are they? Who's there? What are they doing? And so that I focus on adapting that material first. And then what you have is you have this mass of material that covers what's happening, and you just pick the best lines. You pick the best
that's
parts.
What I was going to ask you, because I'm you said 8 pages of a guy making coffee. How do you break that down? Do you break it down into 4 panels per page of him making the coffee and the thoughts going through his head, or is that because I know you were saying you're doing a 1-to-1 almost right now, with a page is a page.
Well, but not literally. That's just how it's breaking down in terms of where I got to in the story. But it's not literally, if you go to page 1, that's page 1. If you go to page 2, that's page 2. There's stuff that gets cut.
Okay.
And so it does. So really what's nice is, so when you have a panel of the guy pouring the cup of coffee, you have 6 paragraphs of material of lines to choose from. And so you just get to go, not that one, not that one, that one. And then you grab it, and then it goes on there. Or if then you're like, this page looks a little bare, I need something down here. Then you go back in and you're like, oh, there's another good line. And you pop that in. And it just becomes, it becomes an embarrassment of riches, because you need so little and you have so much that it's just like cherry picking the best parts and peppering it into the page.
Yeah. And I've seen in other comic books where they've done similar, where there's a book and then there's a comic book, and you could definitely tell where they've it almost feels like something's missing, but you can tell they had to make a conscious decision there, what do I say or what do I do here, because the story will kind of be here, and then all of a sudden either a page or a few panels over, it's like something happened in there. They had to make a hard decision.
You're right. They cut something.
Cut something. It's so weird. As you you've done this long enough and you've read enough comic books and stuff like that, you can tell where hard decisions were made when something's been
For sure.
translated from a book into a comic book.
And you know
So,
what's funny? You know, what I figured out from doing this is where the benefit of experience is. So I have, at this point, 20 years of comic making experience. And it's not that the 20 years, I mean, I've gotten better as I've gone along, but that's not the main benefit of experience. The main benefit of experience is every time you find yourself painted in a corner, I have 20 years worth of proof that I always get out of the corner. And so when you find yourself in that corner, you go, oh, it always works out. And so like it's hard to get like super frustrated because there's always there's a line of dialogue, there's a caption, there's an image, something will get me from point A to point B like I need it to. If I just leave that panel right there and just think about it or just let it go for a little bit, the answer always pops up. It always pops up, and it does, and then you move on.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, have you ever you're on the page and you kind of have the way you want to go, but you already know what you want to do on this next page? Do you just go ahead and do the next page and then just kind of like come back over here to this one and go, okay, now I know what I want to do here finally?
Yeah, for sure.
So you have
to
flesh out something over here first before you can, let me flesh this out and then come back over here and then I can nail this and flesh it down as well.
Yeah, and then the other thing, key that unlocked it was basically I do Marvel method with myself. So you tell the story visually first, and then you go in and you put the words in, because if it makes sense visually, the words will just add to it. So it has to make sense visually first. And then whatever words you throw on top of it, it already works because it works visually. So if it works without the words,
caveat that with issue 1, the first 8 pages, it does not apply. That theory.
Yes, yeah. Well, because you want to, what you want to do in those first 8 pages. Well, there's a couple of games I'm playing there. First is I wanted to deviate from the source material right off the bat.
Oh,
just so no one could. Just so I didn't have to worry about it. I'm like, I've already done it. I've already changed something. So let's get that out of the way. So
I mean, as I'm reading issue 1, in the first page, I forgot what it was, but then there's the talking dolphin appears throughout it, and you're like, why in the fuck is there a talking dolphin? Pardon my French if you're not.
No, of course, yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck is he doing? Why is there a talking dolphin? And then my fault for not reading or catching up on what the actual source material was first. And I'm like, I'm going to read the first issue. It was sent to me graciously. I appreciated it. I'm going to read it. And I'm like, oh God, what am I reading? And then that's okay. Story time, finally.
Yeah.
And you start getting into the story, and I got through it. I'm like, okay, let me go figure out what exactly this is, because I'm like, those first 8 pages they're out there. And when I'm telling people this, and I'm like, hey, I just read this book. The first 8 pages were wow, but then this story is good, and they're like, what? I'm like, you have to see it.
Before we settled down into a pretty straightforward, Raymond Chandler detective novel, we wanted to at least make sure that you knew that you were in for a different kind of ride, that it's not just a straightforward detective novel.
Nailed that part.
Right on. I'm so glad. I like your reaction to that, because so many people that read it are already initiated into that world, so they don't even notice that the first 8 pages are weird. You know what I mean? Because they know to expect it. They know that I'm playing the hits on those early pages. But that's awesome that it stands out as truly really bizarre, which is what I was shooting for.
You more than accomplished that, because like I said, I'm gonna have to, as soon as I got done reading, you bring up Dr. Google and you start Googling what it is exactly that they're accomplishing here, and you're like, oh, this makes so much more sense now.
And so it really is a book that's built for Google, even though it was written pre-Google, because every little thing is a rabbit hole that goes on forever. Like every little name drop, every little thing will just set you off in to
You will
never
Google
return.
I'm not kidding. If people are as curious as me when it's something like this, if they don't have Google up on another screen on their computer, they're like, wait a minute. That's a fucking real person.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're not doing the book justice because you really bring up Google while you're doing it and literally Google events. And you're like, this guy was really name dropping.
Yeah, and what's fun about it too is that's part of the charm of his writing is that like sometimes you'll get to a point where it's so ridiculous that you look it up, and when it turns out that that ridiculous thing is true, you then start to look at the other stuff where you were like, well, clearly that's not serious, and then you start to look at it differently because sometimes it does. Sometimes the weird stuff does turn out to have a basis in reality. If not truth, it has a basis in reality.
Yep.
Like oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, even the talking dolphin, it has a basis in reality because this was written around the time that John Lilly was trying to communicate with dolphins, and there's that famous story about them feeding LSD to dolphins and the lady falling in love with a dolphin, and they lived as a couple in a half aquatic, half regular house. And so like as much as the talking dolphin is like, come on, that's insane, there's a basis in reality for it.
You got to think about it though. This is at the time when LSD was becoming a huge drug on the streets, and there was rumors of the CIA conducting experiments with people and animals using LSD and other illicit drugs. There was all these rumors, some possibly laced with truth, that was happening at this time that he wrote this book. And that's what I enjoyed about the comic book and from my research on the book is there's a lot of truth here and a lot of things that people believed were rumored, but you could easily just as much Google it now and realize that there's truth behind that. Even though in and of itself is not real, but there's some truth in there.
And then to return to our friend Carrie Thornley, who at the time that the novel was conceived was very upset that he was being accused of being involved with Lee Harvey Oswald, years down the road decides that he was, and he was mind controlled and forgot about it. So he succumbed to, kind of the pressure of the moment, and his mental health kind of became such that he was open to the suggestion that he was basically like a Manchurian candidate guy. And then, so Robert Anton Wilson,
Edgar Allan Poe.
Right. So Robert Anton Wilson's trying to like calm him down and be like, come on, you know that you weren't involved in this, and you lived here, you did this. And so then Carrie Thornley's like, well, Robert Anton Wilson is in on it, and he's my CIA handler. And so he eventually thought that Mr. Wilson was involved in the Kennedy assassination. Wilson had to move his family because Thornley was off his rocker and was like showing up at the house half crazed. So there's, he created a religion where you worship the goddess of chaos.
Goddess of chaos, yeah.
In his later years, he said if he knew it was all going to come true, he would have created a religion around Aphrodite instead of Eris.
Oh, that's awesome. I like his thinking though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And even as he like kind of went through various contortions of what he believed was true, he kind of maintained his sense of humor and his kind of whimsy, at least at times. Very awesome. Interesting guy. Yeah.
All right, so let's tell everybody what they can expect from issue 2, not just from the book itself, but from the Kickstarter. Like what are y'all making available to everybody when they go and back issue 2 of Tales of the Illuminatus?
Sure. So I'm kind of a bare bones Kickstarter person still, because I would just want to make sure that I can get the books done and I can get them delivered. So I don't at this point yet, maybe down the road I will. I don't really do the bells and whistles. So it's We're going back to, so we sold out. I'm very proud of this because I mentioned before how you used to have to get 1,000 books printed and they would sit in your garage forever and ever.
Yep.
We sold out of the first printing of issue 1. And then so we went back.
Sized.
Yes. Oh yeah. That was that. You know why that was important to me? Because it's I'm really embracing the 1970s aesthetic. And I love, you know, those old Conan books, like the big giant Conan
Dude,
books.
they still make them. They're still producing them that way.
And have you ever read American Splendor, the Harvey Pekar book?
No.
Very another like magazine size, and then also Will Eisner's The Spirit. Back in the day, they used to do those magazine size.
I know the current run of Conan is the magazine size. Distillery Media is doing magazine size books.
Oh, I love it! I love it.
This one is the new Mouse Guard, which is, you know, it just dropped this week, but it's the miniature magazine size. That's why it's in a magazine.
Oh, I like it. Yeah,
book, but it's only a quarter size, and it's always been done this way. They do it this way on purpose because it's about a mouse and it's small. And
I like that. Yeah,
really cool.
Yeah,
and then Kevin Eastman's new The Last Ronin is done magazine size as well. So
that's awesome.
Seeing more books done magazine size here in the last like 2 or 3 years since
it's really
I really started collecting again. You do see some.
It lets you spread out it a little bit more, and it lets you just kind of like pack more onto the page. You know, I got really into the Chris Claremont X-Men as I was making this, and like the amount of action they would pack on a page. It takes you 45 minutes to read one of those books. These days it takes you 7 minutes. Like like I remember reading the old Warren Ellis Moon Knight books, and it would take me three minutes to read an issue. Whereas and they were great, they were beautiful, they were composed so well. But reading those Chris Claremont X-Men books is just like every page is just like it's 7 panels, and every panel has every single character in it. And so there's just something about like just packing everything in.
I like it. That's really cool.
So we went back for a second printing, and we're just
That's
about
cool.
out of that.
I just noticed that one.
Oh yeah, like, this
if that one's available, I'm like, I want to get that.
Oh one. Yeah, for sure. This is Todd Purse, the other artist on the book. This is his cover. And then so we're going back to press with the Kickstarter. So if you missed issue 1, we have a third variant cover coming out that's being drawn right now. So you can get issues 1 and issues 2. A lot of people like to get doubles, so that was a thing that got requested a lot.
Like, I don't too much care about doubles, but if I'm going to dive into something, if the first one is available, I do like to just go ahead and grab that too, because I love physical books, the smell, the paper.
Oh yeah.
Everything about it is like I was speaking to you about earlier when we just interviewed Bruno on Saturday morning, and his covers were like these amazingly beautiful abstract sci-fi things. I'm like, dude, you know how cool this would be if it was a virgin variant? And he was like, I haven't considered it. I'm like, dude, you should probably think about that one.
Yeah,
these
absolutely.
Amazing. And then he hit me back like a few days later. He's like, yeah, you're right. I was like, I get bright ideas sometimes, buddy.
For sure. There's something.
Love that physical copy and the smell and just the turning
the whole thing,
the way it sounds. It just
absolutely. I know, and that's another thing about doing it magazine size and just like it. In a way, like it's the production of a physical item is half the fun of this. Like it just. Because like doing art online it's fun, it's great, but there's something about like having a physical object, mailing it, packaging it up, and mailing it to people, and then taking it to Comic Cons and meeting people, and there's just something about the production of a physical object that is so fun. So we're
talking about magazine-sized books. This is off the topic and off the wall here. Penthouse started doing comic books again. And theirs are as well our magazine size.
Oh, that's awesome! Yeah. Some of the greatest illustrators of all time spent time there, so that's a good thing that they're getting back into it.
And some of the greatest artists are still doing their work there.
That's outstanding.
Like a lot of the modern guys, like they're doing the artwork for these stories, and you're like, you can almost see like oh, that's this person. Oh, well, how do you know it's that person? I'm like, oh, I just know the art style. You get
That's
to a
one of my
certain
favorite things
point,
in the world. Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's like if a Peach Momoko does a cover, it's a Peach
You
Momoko
know it
cover.
immediately. Yep, she does not need to
David
sign it.
Nakayama, the same way. Jim Lee,
Yep,
Jim.
absolutely.
I got the Jim Lee cover on the new Batman Hush, because Hush is back in Batman. They're doing another run, and I guess like issue 186 or something like that. Weird. I don't collect Batman unless it's something off the wall. But I missed the first run of Hush. I'm like, I'm not missing another run of Hush. So I told Scott my LCS. So I'm like, dude, I want Hush. That's it. He's like, you don't even clip Batman. I'm like, I know, but I want Hush.
Yeah,
Hush is one of those
yeah.
characters I love.
Yep.
And
And that initial run was so fun too.
it was. And I have it in trade paperback. So I mean, I have it, but something about single issues.
For sure.
People don't get it when I talk about comic books, and they're like, dude, you're treating this like it's. I'm like, it is. Like, you don't understand. It's like when you go to the bookstore and you buy a new book, and you're just like,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or an old bookstore,
Yep.
that smell in the old bookstore. And people are like, dude, that's weird. I'm like, yeah, but it smells wonderful. You don't have
No,
any
for
idea
sure.
unless
For sure.
you go in there. So
That's a little bit. That's why I at some point I want to find someone that will do good prints on newsprint again, because there's something
I wish
about
you
that
loved me, because
old
that would be really cool.
that textured paper is so
The
so
sound.
magical. Yeah,
The sound
just like
of it.
there's nothing I like more than flat colors on a good textured paper. I think there's something that those gradients and that the painting rendering will never capture, is just that weird random chaotic newsprint grain underneath bright colors. I just absolutely love it.
So it's funny because I was telling you earlier, Comic-Con tomorrow, and Luana Vecchio, I think she's from France, I want to say, and she's doing Lovesick right now. She, like, the finale just come out this week, which is what I'm going to have signed. But she uses a lot of pinks and blacks and dark tones with pink and shades of pink, and it reminds me of the older stuff, like the old school, like the colors were very basic. It was either black and grayscale or black and white with hints of color mixed in, but not a lot. But she uses pink as kind of like the backgrounds of it, with the blacks and the darker tones on the front of the pink, with the characters in the book, and it just works out so perfectly that it's very color rich, but it's still it's 4 colors on a page, and it's just so vibrant the way the violence that's in the book and the way it is off the pink, to me, is just like phenomenal. Like how did you think of this? It is amazing. And that's another one of those just little nuances that certain artists bring to their work, it's defining almost.
That's one of my favorite things, to walk around the cons and just see the endless variety of innovation. And just like when you walk around, it's like, I never would have thought of that. I know, like the clever foldings, and like the different ways people will produce the books, or just the art style or the concept. It's when I walk around like the Small Press Expo, it feels like I'm walking around the multiverse and just seeing all these different worlds that are just completely unique, and just things I never would have thought of. And it's just, you go from one to another to another to another, and just I don't think the comic world has ever been this vibrant. I don't think it's ever been this populated with talent, and
have been explosive, and I've been here for every minute of it. It's been so fun watching just the evolution over the last 3 years. And we're not talking a decade here or 5 years. We're talking like the last year, 3 years, the evolution of comic books as a whole. Different thinkers, different minds, different types of art that have come into the medium has been phenomenal. And I'm looking forward to what else is out there, in the next 3 to 5 years. Because, it's just, it didn't evolve for so long. from the golden
Yeah.
age, silver age to like here recently, nothing evolved to me. It was there. It was the same, you know, basically artist, doing all the books. Image come along and kind of changed that a lot when they were like, because they will publish you, they will keep so much of the money to pay for them publishing you, but you make the money.
Yeah, no, Image is like one of the greatest innovations in
And to
comics that could
me,
ever happen.
that
Entertainment, even.
that was like the first real evolution to me of comic books is when Image started, doing that. And now within the last 3 years, we've seen that Image again leading the forefront of that when they brought in Skybound, and we're talking now almost $1 trillion enterprise
Amazing.
there. It's amazing because think about Invincible, The Walking Dead, Transformers, GI Joe. Now it's dude, it's
and it's the
it leaves you
creators
breathless to
doing
think
it.
about it. It is.
Yeah,
It really is.
that's
And then
yeah,
like Ghost Machine now is with Image, but Ghost Machine is like its own team. Tiny Onion, all these, with James Tinian, like all of these people they're like, I'm going to start a publishing company, and then all the big guys, Image, Boom Studios, are like, hey, I'll take that book, or hey, I'll take that book, and they print it for them, and then they take their percentage for the print and the distro, but everything is coming back to the artist now. And to me, in the like Ghost Machine, it's artists, it's pencilers, it's drawers, you name it. Jeff Johns and that team over there are doing some amazing things. And it's probably one of my favorite things right now between Ghost Machine and what James Tinian is doing with Tiny Onion. Amazing things. So
yeah. It just occurs to me that Neil Adams, his vision of the industry has kind of won to a certain degree. That he won. He like the like kind of stultified extractive companies are on the decline, and the individual creators are ascendant. And it's everything he fought for. It's everything he fought for. It's everything he fought against. And he really, and like, I mean, because I'm sure, I know there's a lot of other people, but I feel like he was the loudest and proudest and kind of paved the way that then the Image guys took it and ran with it when they had that rare opportunity, because I don't think Image could have worked at any other time in history as a startup.
Todd did it at the right time, at the right place, and it nothing but positive results since.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, any other time the sales wouldn't have been enough to justify them jumping ship. But it just worked out.
And was like, he bet on himself, and he's not looked back since. He's still
for sure.
I mean, Spawn is until issue 300 and
I love that.
Or 370
I love that.
Something.
That's I love that. It's
only
like
$2.99.
That's amazing. He's further along on Spawn than they were on Amazing Spider-Man when he left. Like that's outstanding.
And him and Jim Lee's run on Amazing Spider-Man, by far one of my favorite runs, period.
There's something so exciting about every single one of Todd McFarlane's drawings, like especially Spider-Man. Like, because there's all those, he did a bunch of those Marvel Tales covers that like I wasn't around for, so I'll just see them online. And just like my blood pressure spikes every time I see one of those. It's just like, like there's just something the
famous, Wolverine claw with the Hulk in it.
Yeah.
That's Todd McFarlane.
Right. Yeah.
And then you look at the number of homages to his Amazing Spider-Man cover, where he's swinging through the city on the web.
Yeah.
Think about how many covers have done homages to that one cover. There's probably more homages to that cover than any other cover ever.
For sure. And also the weird, the one from Spider-Man 8, where he's sitting with the arm all twisted and he's sitting in the catcher's position. Yeah, like that. You've seen that over and over. But there's something about the way he draws that just, even when he's just drawing something ordinary, it just kind of radiates.
He's another one. He goes live on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or whatever, and they're like, oh, people will ask him about drawing. He's just like, oh yeah, hey, and he starts,
Yep. Yeah.
and you're like, what? You lost me at like stroke number 3 of your magic marker, dude.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
but he's so like he's weird and he's kind of out there, but fuck if he's not one of the best in the business right now.
No, for sure. He's endlessly
He's a
entertaining, endlessly like innovating. Yeah, I really get a kick out of him.
I do too. I know we're completely off course here on what
but that
we're here talking about, but
it's actually kind of fun because like most of these that I get to do are more like culture shows as opposed to comics. So like
you're a comic book guy. You're here to talk about comic
for
books.
sure.
I'm a comic book guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I love pop culture. I do a show once a month on pop culture, whether it be like, a show that just ended. Like we got Reacher coming up. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk about Reacher, the book that's the new series was based on. We're going to do all that. We're going to do one when Daredevil comes to a close. But comic books, though, to me, that's getting to talk to another person who knows comic books, who's in comic books, and we could go all night. I know we don't have all night, but that's what I feel the strongest about. So for me, I could just do this all night about comic books and different artists and stuff like that.
Yeah, one of the things is that like this is a comic book. You know what I mean? This isn't an adaptation that I would do in any form or fashion. It's made as a comic book, and it's kind of funny because like I would say 80% of the people that read it probably have read 0 other comic books. Like it's kind of something that appeals to people outside of the comic book world.
So it's funny because we go back and we look at it, it's the Tales of the Illuminatus. The first thing that pops into somebody's head is the Illuminati. And it now being this cultural mainstream thing now, and we're like, ooh, that's about the Illuminati. Let me get that. I want to read that.
Right. Yeah. So it's not necessarily
for you,
Right. Yeah.
And then when they start reading it, they're like, wait, what? Because I'm pretty sure, like, until you're probably this next coming up issue and probably the 3rd, 4th, 5th issue is really when it starts to dive more into that Illuminati type of stuff that people
for sure.
And
so we've kind of set up our premise now, and we're going to be easing into the actual like overarching storyline. But also what we have is, and a lot of the things you saw in those original 8 pages, the opening 8 pages, is so the novel also has one of those like Simpsons, Springfield giant casts of characters. So that's like one of what. So all those characters you saw at the beginning, they all cycle back around, like your Cletus the slack-jawed yokel. Like they all become inhabitants of this world, and so it's actually really. It's almost like a episode of Seinfeld where like everything comes back around full circle in the end. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of just like world building amongst the main storyline. I should say storylines. There's
multiple stories.
Very much a multiple storyline thing. But we definitely get more into the proper like Illuminati behind the stages, something that you would recognize as what you see in pop culture. There's a very interesting thing too. So I don't know if you noticed or not, but the main character, the main detective, his name is Saul Goodman. Which
I did notice that.
So and obviously the book predated Breaking Bad by several decades. So I assume that they are probably just making the same joke. That would be my assumption.
That's where my brain went immediately. I'm like, Saul Goodman. I'm like, this came out before Breaking Bad. I wonder if they did that as kind of like a homage or like a joke within a joke.
So, but there is an interesting connection between Breaking Bad and Illuminatus, which is through the X-Files. So everyone, I don't think Chris Carter has ever said one way or the other, but back in the 90s, everyone assumed
Chris Carter created the X-Files.
Yes, yeah.
I just want to make sure people when they
listen I'm sorry. Yes, I guess that's older. Carter. Yeah,
that's our generation, man.
Yeah, right.
Which I still watch. I love the X-Files.
So when the X-Files was first coming out, everyone assumed that it was like influenced by Illuminatus because it has the same general structure. You have the two detectives on the trail of the shadowy organization. You're mixing in all the like conspiracy theories of the day. It follows very much the same formula. No one's ever said one way or the other. But a young writer who got his start on the X-Files was Vince Gilligan, who would then go on to create Breaking Bad and Saul Goodman. So if Illuminatus did influence X-Files, then perhaps Vince Gilligan was aware of it, and perhaps it is a reference. I would say chances are against it, but it's not impossible.
It's still cool to look at and form your own modern, like, this is based off of this, and this is based off of this, right? You know?
Yeah. Now there are some things that so Lost, they what is it? Damon Lindelof admits Lost is influenced by Illuminatus. And then the two big ones,
the good seasons.
That's right. That Room 23 specifically is definitely pulled from Illuminatus. And then Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, they're kind of the how like everyone's like, oh, they're similar and they kind of pull from a very similar world. They're both heavily and admittedly influenced by Robert Anton Wilson. So a lot of those similarities that you see in Alan Moore and Grant Morrison trace back to Illuminatus and Wilson's other work. They're both huge fans. And that's where some of those strands lead back to.
That's cool. But let's start wrapping it up. Let everybody know when Tales of the Illuminatus will drop, and tell everybody where they can find you, Bobby.
Sure. So easiest place, the big catch-all is talesofilluminatus.com. That will link you to everywhere else. We have a Substack that's linked on there. We have a Blue Sky account that's linked on there.
Yep.
We have an Instagram account that you can find us through there. So everything kind of runs through. I'm trying to get more back onto personal web pages. That's why I'm framing it that way.
We have one too. Yeah.
And I'm very proud of this. Talesofilluminatus.com, all 100% hand coded. I wrote the HTML and CSS myself.
Nice.
There's no platform. It is just me writing code.
High school teachers.
That's right. Right.
Some of them know what they're doing.
Yeah. So So there's zero platform. It is just me writing my hack code. And then we're starting the Kickstarter on Tuesday, on April Fool's Day. It's going to run for 2 months. We're going to do weekly updates where you're going to see, we're going to drop some of the world building stuff, some of the background stuff. We have a couple of guys, Steve Fly and Dan Robinson, who do music for us. One of the threads in the novel is about a rock concert and competing record labels. So we have a couple people making music for us to kind of bring that world alive.
I just read another Kickstarter that did something similar to that. Like there's a whole album that goes along with the comic book. It's really cool.
Yeah, so we do indeed have an album that's going to be associated with this. So we'll do weekly updates for the next 2 months. The book should, if everything goes perfectly, it'll come out in June. If things go normally, July, and if things go terribly, August. And that's kind of my time frame. I guess this is how probably most people do Kickstarter these days. It's not like we don't need the money to make it. It's a pre-order.
Yeah.
The book's going to come out either way. So the threshold's going to be really, really low. Just something. So it's really more of a pre-order.
I know a lot of artists like Bruno over the weekend, like that. He's 100% funded through Kickstarter. So there are some, like in your case, where absolutely. The book's going to come out. You can order it off the website depending on the Kickstarter. But for some, like Bruno, it's 100% crowdfunded, which is really cool. I appreciate people who appreciate the work that goes into these books and back Kickstarters that way. Which
absolutely,
cool either way. It's an avenue for people to put their work out there, and I will support that for as long as I humanly can. If I have
it's got to
You
be the
know,
best thing that's ever happened to indie media. I like, in all
it really
honesty,
is.
and like, and when you click around, it's kind of like that thing. This has happened to me a couple times where you like see a stand-up comedian and are like, "Oh, I've never heard of this guy," and it turns out he's selling out stadium tours. Like he's got this whole world.
Yep.
Like I was clicking through, you click through Kickstarter sometimes, and you're like, "Oh, cool, a comic book about hockey. I wonder what that's doing." $6 million, and it's like, whoa, I
Yeah.
never even heard of this. How
Yeah.
is this book about hockey doing $6 million? And it's just there's all these worlds out there waiting to be
Lady
discovered.
Death. Lady Death just did their own. They left Kickstarter and formed their own Kickstarter through their own internet service, their own web page. So
Oh,
it's
nice, yeah.
Kickstarter, but it's like it's just Lady Death.
That's beautiful. That's even better.
It's really
That's
cool.
more that like the more direct you can get, I think the better. And I think that people are going to
Agreed.
keep figuring out ways
Agreed.
to cut out more and more middlemen and just get direct between creator and reader. And
And
I think it's a
that's what
beautiful
they did.
thing.
They
It's a
took
beautiful
completely
thing.
out the middleman who would be taking some money off of their plates and went 100% on their own, which again, it's one of those where I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it
No,
still goes to the stores too. I mean, you can still buy Lady Death at your local comic shops, but you can literally get it direct from them and save yourself a couple of dollars.
you know, it's why I think comic people are inherently become half business people, because ever since I was little, there's been the Chicken Little, like the industry's going to end. So like ever since I was 12 years old, I'm like thinking of ideas of like, how can we save comics? How can comics work? And I think a lot of people,
90s, we got pretty close there to losing
yeah,
comic books.
for sure. And that's always so there's a lot of like very creative innovations that come out of the comic industry because of that mindset. So it's an interesting place to operate, because there's always something cooking.
It really is. And I always tell people there's something for everybody, even your children.
Yeah, for sure. And that was Scott McCloud. You ever read what is it? Reinventing Comics by Scott McCloud.
I haven't, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I know the book you're talking about.
He basically predicted everything. Like he wrote the book in the year 2000 and predicted essentially just about where we are right now. And like the explosion of genres, it not just being a delivery system for one type of story, but a delivery system for every type of story.
And here's what I've loved about the uprising of indie comics is it's no longer about the superheroes and the villains. You look at J.G. Jones in his new book Dust to Dust. Phenomenal thriller based out in Oklahoma. It's written by J.G. Jones. It's drawn by J.G. Jones. The covers are done by J.G. Jones. And there's another guy, I can't remember his name, who's also a really good writer himself, who helps him write the book. But it's a thriller. And then you have people like James Tynion, who, to me, has redefined what we know as a hero with Erica Slaughter and Something is Killing the Children in the House of Slaughter. So, I mean, it's what a time to be in it, man.
Yeah, really for sure. And it is like we're finally moving more towards like where they're at in Europe and in Japan, where these are things that everybody reads. Everybody reads them because everyone has something that's up their alley. It's just pictures and words. It's just pictures and words. Like it can be anything. It can be anything. And I'm so glad to see it becoming more things.
You bring that up. I had a friend of mine from work. We have kids around the same age, and we were talking one day. He's like, "Yeah, my daughter's interested in manga." I'm like, "Okay, let her read it." He's like, "Well, what is it?" I'm like, "Dude, it's a comic book, essentially."
Yeah.
He's like, "But she needs to." I'm like, "Dude, just let her read."
Yeah. He's like, yeah. Reading is reading.
That was my point. I'm like, "Dude, reading is reading, man. Your daughter wants to read something."
Yeah, that's amazing.
My daughter's
that's awesome.
Reading it since she was like a kid, Of course, I made sure it wasn't nothing too, violent or graphic,
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm like, dude, my daughter literally has shelves upon shelves upon shelves of bookcases of manga. Dude, your daughter is literally asking you permission to read a book.
Right.
Why would you say no? And they're not.
Right.
Yeah, can be expensive, but for the most part, $7.99, $8.99.
Yeah, it's not
That's
bad.
the price of a book anyway.
I got into trouble. My kids got real into One Piece, and
Dude,
there's a window of those books where the print runs are kind of low, and so it was like $8, $17, $33. I was like, oh no! I spent a lot of money on One Piece, but it was amazing. It was like,
thankfully my daughter never got into that one.
Yeah, but it was great because I couldn't get them to read the old Spider-Man comics from the 90s because that's not of their world. They needed something that was of their world, that was of the moment, and that's where the work was being done, and it was awesome. I tried my best. I couldn't read it myself because it wasn't of my world. You know what I mean? Like but it was just pictures and words, and it did the same thing for them that those old books did for me. And
exactly.
Yeah,
your kid is asking you to read. Parents out there, if you listen to this, if your child is asking for a book, a magazine, a comic book, they're asking you to read. Let them read.
Yeah, for sure.
It's that simple. They're literally asking you permission to read something. Let them read.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, magical thing.
Let them read, or whatever the one is for manga.
Right? Yeah.
So I don't understand that. Just parents, let your kids read if that's what they're asking for. That's simple. They're going to be smarter at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. It's better than like just passively consuming something. Like it is. It's an active process. Your brain is processing information. It's stitching it together just like it does when.
Phone.
Yeah, exactly.
So all right, Bobby. Let's wrap it up.
You got it.
April 1st, everybody, Tales of the Illuminatus issue 2 will be out on Kickstarter. As soon as it goes live and I see Bobby and his team post it, I'll share it across my social media platforms as well. Bobby, did you tell them where they could find you?
Yeah, so talesofilluminatus.com is the best place to find the book. BobbyCampbell.net is the best place to find me. And there's links to all the social media things, but again, I'm trying to plant the seed of the personal website. So I think HTML, CSS, and RSS are the wave of the future.
Hey, everything comes back around.
That's right.
But as always, you can find me on Blue Sky at USDN Chairman and across all of the other social media platforms as USDN Podcast. That is all we have for you tonight. April 1st, the Kickstarter goes live. We hope you would come out and support that and Bobby and his team and what they're doing out there. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, Bobby Campbell, Tales of the Illuminatus are now USDN approved. Everybody have a good night and a safe weekend.
It's a trap!